The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to our program here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, and joined with Reverend Mark Woods from Cherry Point United Methodist Church and Bishop Doc Loomis, Bishop in Residence at All Saints Anglican Church. And we want to start with a story that about an event that happened this past week. It was at the Supreme Court, as the Supreme Court agreed to hear a case of the Little Sisters of the Poor. And as we look at first the Wall Street Journal article and also one from Religion Today, this is the Wall Street Journal article is headlined, "The High Court Gets Religion. The Obama DOJ pleaded with the court not to take the Little Sisters case." And William McGurn writes, "So the Little Sisters of the Poor will get their day in court, in the Supreme Court, that is. This past Friday, the justices agreed to hear the Little Sisters' argument that not only would Obamacare's contraceptive mandate force them to violate their beliefs, the Obama administration's accommodation to have them sign a paper that would empower the sisters' insurer to provide the birth control is just an accounting gimmick. As President Obama continues to threaten them with millions of dollars in IRS fines, the sisters have made their position clear. We cannot possibly choose between our care for the elderly poor and our faith, and we shouldn't have to." The Beckett Fund is representing the Little Sisters of the Poor, and their senior counsel says the federal government doesn't need the Little Sisters of the Poor or any other ministry to help distribute the abortion-inducing drugs and other contraceptives. Make some other comments that we may want to get to, too. But, Doc, let me start with you here. And what do you think about what the Beckett Fund has to say about this? Or the Little Sisters' argument, anyway.
Well, the Beckett Fund is an interesting group. They're not a necessarily a Christian advocacy group. They've worked for many years with all sorts of different groups: Hasidic Jews, Muslims, Christians, Zoroastrists. Yes, Freddie Mercury could have hired them.
Yes.
We have here a really interesting situation with a I think what's a really strong case for the Little Sisters. There's a reason that Obama doesn't want this in front of the courts, and that's easy because this makes an amazing poster.
Yes.
You know, these poor, I mean, they're not the sisters of the poor. They are the little sisters of the poor, which makes it even worse. And so now we've got these jackboot thugs taking the little sisters of the poor to court, and it makes a very black and white thing. It's a line a lot of people don't want to cross. When Hobby Lobby went to court, I think a lot of people just went, yeah, well, they're a business, they're a corporation, they're Christians. Right. But these are the little bitty sisters of the poor. And I don't think Obama wants to go, I don't think he wants to go out thinking his last big court thing is going to be, what did they call it? The article, the boots on the necks of the little sisters. I just love that. Yeah. Now, the challenge is that this particular court case is really about them being completely separated from what's often termed in the media a compromise. The compromise
accommodation,
the compromise or the accommodation is this: you don't actually have to, Little Sisters of the Poor, pay for this, but in your place, the insurance companies will. Okay, so that's like me saying, well, I want you to kill somebody, and I'm going to give you a gun. But if you opt out, I'll give it to the other guy over there, and he'll shoot them for you. And I think that's pretty much as straight a metaphor as I can come up with. And I think they have a really good case here.
Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I find it interesting. And most of the arguments kind of on the side of they should provide this birth control, either the Little Sisters doing it, which they're not going to pay for it, or the insurer doing it, kind of is based upon a kind of individualistic argument. Either way that most people are going to say is it should be up to the individual whether they choose to use the birth control, right? So it shouldn't be up to the sisters. The problem with that argument, and particularly for a monastic order, is there is not much here in a monastic order that is individualistic. It is a kind of communal living, and the very practice and work that these that the Little Sisters do with their ministry with the elderly, with their ministry with the poor, is a sort of communal living together, which does not lend itself very good to a kind of individualistic argument, which seems to be what a possible counter argument to their argument would be, well, we just want the individual to make their choice on whether they use it or not. And that I think that's going to be a problem for the monastic order, yeah.
But the PR argument, I think, as you also state, Doc, is huge. I mean, the PR problem here. I mean, you kind of also have this picture of boxes of Plan B pills showing up at the Little Sisters of the Poor doorstep, and or they're going out and serving the poor, and there's somebody from an agency or an insurer who's coming behind them and handing out these as well. This is the image that this compromise or accommodation kind of gives out.
Well, and there's probably a fundamental theological disagreement here on what constitutes women's health between the Little Sisters and perhaps the way it's narrated in the Obama healthcare thing
and the Planned Parenthood argument that's going on right now.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think perhaps that's probably a little bit of why they might say we probably should hear this case as well, just because it's not just Little Sisters versus whoever it is, the Defense Department. I mean the healthcare. There's a much bigger issue here. It really is an issue of women's health. What does that look like? I don't think the Supreme Court will get in there, but they might. But I think this is a little bit more than just the sisters versus
the Becket Fund senior counsel again goes on to say, Mark Reinze goes on to also say that yet it not only insists on forcing them to participate in the delivery, it argues that their beliefs against participating are wrong, and that government officials and judges can tell the Little Sisters what Catholic theology really requires. And that's wrong, and it's dangerous, especially when those same government officials have disrespectfully compared the sisters' beliefs to, quote, fighting an invisible dragon that can be vanquished with the stroke of the sisters' own pen. Powerful language from both sides here now that, again, they're not just saying that they're avoiding the mandate, but that the government is claiming their theology is wrong. Do you read that here? And I mean that's a powerful argument to me.
Yeah, I think the writer is right to say that only because this is a theological argument. We like to think that it is not, and I find it interesting, and I've said it in here before, that when we can't decide on theological arguments, we go to the Supreme Court and they help us tell us what our theology is. Right?
Isn't that a problem?
That in itself, to me, is a problem, and probably a different segment for a different day on whether the Supreme Court does theology or not. But I mean, this is a theological argument. I think this is definitely.
Well, the argument is whether the government is doing theology, not just the Supreme Court, but whether or not the government edict is in itself a theological statement.
Yeah, I would argue that it is, only because I'm not sure that there exists a space outside of God. Therefore, I'm going to chalk theology up to a lot of different things.
But the interesting thing is the government's argument in this. You're going to love this, especially if you happen to be a Catholic this morning listening to this. The government's argument is the Little Sisters of the Poor are not religious enough to be exempted in the manner the churches are. Are you kidding me? they're
a monastic order.
Here's a third a women's third order that has been in existence literally since the end of the French Revolution. They take care of somewhere between 13 and 20,000 elderly poor people. They've been doing this for 175 years. They have never even considered something like this, being dumped in their laps. So it would be a surprise when suddenly a government says, now you have to be responsible for a board of medicines. This is just not a part of their history at all. They're not religious enough to be considered exempt as a church or a church ministry. Really?
Here's what I want to say. The church when monasticism, if we look at the history of monasticism, the church itself, when monasticism started, becoming maybe a thing, I don't know what a better word for that would be, had a tenuous relationship with monasticism.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't know
Sure.
what to do with these
Well, they were out in the
monastics.
desert.
That's right. St. Anthony or even Francis or even St. Benedict to a certain extent. They didn't know what to do with them. And I think the government now is having that debate. So, is having that kind of, what do we do with these monastic orders? What are how do they function religiously? So I think you're right. I think it's utterly ridiculous. I'm with you on this, Doc. But I do understand the kind of tenuous relationship that they would have with monasticism.
Explain it to me, please, because I am at a total loss. Here's a group of people that are living, for all intents and purposes, precisely the way we as New Testament Christians would expect to see the community of God living, with some kind of a common understanding, with some kind of a common mission and work. With a true religion is this, that you care for the widows and the orphans. Well, here they are, taking care of the elderly poor, 13,000 of them. It doesn't get any more religious body than that.
I was actually surprised when I first read that they even had a health care plan. I would have thought the communal nature of it would probably have precluded that they would have taken care of themselves and they would have drawn on each other.
Well, and there's the other irony of, isn't it? Because I just love this stuff. It's because of the way history runs around in circles until it dizzies itself and ends up in court. We have a remarkable history in the Third Order of starting what? The very hospitals that provide the health care that now is in question. Yeah. They came from the Third Order.
We'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And welcome back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, and joined with Reverend Mark Woods and Bishop Doc Loomis. And we are talking about another subject in the news from this week. And there has been a lot of talk, and we have talked before as well, about asylum seekers in Europe. And now this story comes from NPR. It says, for some Muslim asylum seekers in Germany, Christianity beckons. Chancellor Angela Merkel says that Islam is an integral part of modern-day Germany, but that hasn't kept thousands of Muslim asylum seekers from giving up their faith to become Christians in recent years. The reason they convert are complicated, and that gives an example of an Afghan, Daoud Rahimi, who, for instance, a 20-year-old Afghan who arrived in Germany a few months ago, was one of dozens of asylum seekers and attending a recent baptism class at Evangelical Lutheran Trinity Church in a Berlin suburb. Like other Afghans seeking refugee status, whom I've interviewed across Germany, Rahimi was quick to affirm his Muslim faith. After some prodding, he nervously admits he might convert to Christianity to avoid deportation, especially now that German government is negotiating with Kabul to repatriate many Afghan migrants. Let's start here before we get into some other parts of this article and other people involved in it here. But, Mark, we have seen now a number of countries in Germany are reacting to what has been an influx of Muslim migrants, well, just migrants, period. Sometimes refugees from Syria, some from other places, but often coming and bringing, obviously, their culture and their faith with them. And some of the countries are now starting to say, well, wait a minute. Maybe it's a little bit too much. Is this just an out for some Muslims so they can stay in Germany?
I think I know the line that Doc's going to take, so I'm going to say the other line. Proverbs chapter 2, it says, fear is the beginning of wisdom. So maybe... So maybe fear here could play its role in bringing people to Jesus. No, it's worked.
Well, we've done that over a few centuries.
Right, I was going to say, for centuries it's worked. Learn the Lord's Prayer or we're going to kill you, in a certain sense. And it evangelized, if to use that word lightly, it evangelized. But no, it's hard. It's hard. I imagine the first bit could be, I don't want to get deported, so Christianity seems like a viable option.
But isn't it interesting, and I don't know enough of the history of the Lutheran Church here too, or of Germany, to know that would be the foundation for staying. Is your faith?
No, it has nothing to do with it being your faith. It has to do with what would happen if they deported you. Mm-hmm. So if you become a Christian, and you're known to be a Christian, and you get deported back to Afghanistan,
yes,
then you will be killed.
Right.
And so the EU doesn't want people to die. They don't want to deport people. And so it's not a test of whether you get to stay based on your faith. It's a test of what's going to happen if we deport you, right?
So it's not asylum based on the persecution you have already been subjected to, but what you would be subjected to.
Yeah. Right. They don't want to be a party to your death by deporting you. But I love what Mark's saying. I agree with your line completely. I mean, let's go back to the beginning of the 4th century. There was a guy named Constantine who converted the entire Roman Empire. Right. I mean, he starts his reign persecuting Christians, goes into a battle, sees a vision, becomes a Christian, and I mean, scholars can argue his
whether
Christian
or not he does,
faith
yes,
or not.
He didn't get baptized until his deathbed, yes, by the way.
But the bottom line, he does impose a conversion on the Roman Empire, which sends Christianity off into, hyperspeed at that point. Mm-hmm. So this isn't a new thing necessarily. I actually agree with you.
Also, it began, though, the monastic movement that we talked about last
No, I think that's
segment.
right. In Christianity, and I'd say probably most religions, that when they're sort of under the gun, that's usually when we do the best work. I know that might not...
You think of that Saturday nights when you're writing your sermon. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. You do your best work. No, but I mean, when there is that kind of pressure, when there is that pressure of persecution, Christianity tends to do its best work there. I mean, that's where Paul does most of his best writing, is when he's sitting in prison as a felon.
Oh, Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, that's another example. I think that's exactly right. Yeah. And so this may be, I don't think the article was suggesting that, but we might be able to step back and say, well, here is some general trends that we see in Christianity.
Now, one of the other things the article does point out, though, is that what has happened to some of these immigrants is that they come and they are disillusioned. They may be prior disillusionment to their faith. They may be coming, though, for economic reasons or other reasons as well. But they come and they see that, well, maybe this wasn't the truth, or maybe what I thought was the truth before in Islam is not.
And people in places like Iran are actually now. You don't have to go to Germany to hear that truth. Mm-hmm. Right. There's a huge underground movement going on in the Middle East in places like Iran, where people are beginning to hear that. Here's the thing. It's really scary, because as we've talked about before, when you are a Muslim, it is all about the family and the community. And so the minute that Christianity becomes a part of your context, your conversation, your person, then you lose instantly everything you've known. And what's the challenge I have a great friend who's spent 20 years in Germany. Mm-hmm. He is so frustrated with the concrete that is the ground there, spiritually speaking. Mm-hmm. He is, almost every year he thinks, I'm not going to stay here. We're not getting anywhere with Christianity in this post-Christian environment. Do you know why he's excited today? Because of the influx of Muslims. He is this is the first time he's sending out his monthly update saying, we're having really great success with Muslims. And he sees it, and he's a smart guy, and he sees this for what it is. Muslims, for the first time, want to know about Christianity, and then when they hear about it, they go, wow, I did not know that.
Right.
And what Christianity does in all things is that when you hold up the truth, that light exposes the lie of wherever you came from, whether it's your sin, whether it's Islam. Christianity holds that light over it. And he's saying, man, all we got to do is stand up and shine a light, and people are being converted like crazy.
In this country, we have... I guess we could say we're spoiled in some fashion, but because of our foundation, the way that we have this freedom to worship in its various expressions, if we have a family member who converts to Islam, we cut off their cell phone plan, not their head. So we don't think about it being we don't think about how that this can be possible. We don't think that this in the reverse we have a hard time accepting that. Do you understand where I'm coming from there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wonder if we would even cut off the cell phone. I think American Christianity in general, I think, at least for a lot of mainline denominations, I would say Methodist has a very uncomfortable relationship with conversion. Does that make sense? Like we want us to be okay. We want Muslims to be okay. We want everyone to be okay where they're at, to each his own, a kind of thing. And so we have a very uncomfortable relationship with saying, you should convert to Christianity. And that might be a problem for us. I mean, we would rather influence people than convert people, right? We want influence in politics. We want influence here and influence here. When in reality, perhaps we don't want to influence people. We want to convert people. We want full out conversion, But that kind of language, at least in American Methodism, is not used. We just don't use that language. And this might be a way that we would look at the Lutheran Church there in Germany and Muslims as using that language of conversion and saying, where are we not paying attention to what we should be doing?
Another facet of this is, and I want to be really careful because so my mother was Roman Catholic, and when she married my father, a Protestant, she actually was shunned by her Roman Catholic family.
Right.
In the same manner, when I was in college, I got engaged to a girl who was a Jewish gal from Buffalo, and we never married. And the reason we never married is because her family threatened to cut her off. So it's not just Muslims who do this kind of shunning thing, as we used to call it. But the piece of this story that is interesting is it seems like people are faith shopping the way they church shop these days. Think about that for a minute, because we, all of us who are pastors, and most all of you at home who attend churches know that people come and go. There's something they don't like at a church politically, or something about authority, whatever it is, or they don't like the fact that the contemporary music, and so they leave and they go to another church. And most of our church growth, that we see, is people coming from another church, right? I think there's a degree to which right now we're seeing that among major faith groups too, that people see a political side of Christianity. And you remember, you all are old enough in this room to remember that there was a time when Christian people were changing to Muslim names, Muhammad Ali's. They were saying, I don't like what I see in the religion of my fathers, so I'm going to go to this thing over here that supports more my politic, my person.
Certainly it was true in the Black Muslim movement of the 60s.
Precisely.
Yes.
And so now I think what we're seeing in Islam is a group of people who are looking at the political and the economic structure of Islam and saying, this just doesn't really work for me. I wonder what else is out there. I think we're at the beginning of that, frankly, which to me says we could be at the beginning of a very major time of conversion for Islam. Wouldn't that be something?
It would be. It would be something. So evangelical Christianity may still have a role to play in the world politics.
If we do what we're supposed to do and offer the things that Christ asks us to offer. If the court doesn't legislate away like the Little Sisters of the Poor.
Well, more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and thank you for joining us here on this Sunday morning, or whenever you're hearing the show as well. You can also find it online too. You can search for it on YouTube, and also on through a link through the Faith Matters web Facebook page. Let's go to another subject here now, and I'm Ben Ball along with Reverend Mark Woods and Bishop Doc Loomis, and we're going to go someplace we've never gone before on the show. We've never mentioned the name of Justin Bieber before, but this comes from ChristianHeadlines.com, and it's written by Veronica Neffinger. And it says, pop superstar Justin Bieber is once again making the news, but this time it is not a scandal or shocking piece of news, but because he invited a reporter to church. The 21-year-old pop star got into a lot of trouble the past couple of years, but from public urination to a night in jail to a confiscated monkey scandal. But recently, and who hasn't had that, right? But recently, Bieber has been telling the media that he's turning his life around and focusing on his faith. The Christian Post reports, while being interviewed by Chris Martins of Billboard, Bieber said, "Enough with the Justin Bieber show. I want to veer away from the self-centered attitude. I've just focused on the people who have been there since the start, on people who are taking the journey now. I want them to feel like we're doing this together." In a previous interview with Complex Magazine, Bieber stated that, "I just honestly want to live like Jesus." After spending some time with Bieber's Beverly Hills residence and accompanying the star to dinner, Martin said that Bieber invited him to attend a church service where Bieber's friend and pastor Judah Smith of the City Church of Seattle was preaching. And in the crowded Beverly Wilshire Hotel, Smith preached the need for Jesus. Let's talk a little bit about this. I think we see this from time to time in pop culture. We'll see a declaration, an epiphany, and many times it's met with skepticism and et cetera. But sometimes then we also watch maybe the true expression of it. You remember Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan had an album that came out after his conversion called "Saved," and so that. There was various things, a lot of print, actually, a lot of ink that was written about that over time. So, Doc, let me start with you here. You actually said you know that he has a Christmas album that's actually pretty good.
It is pretty good. I'm a believer, man.
A believer.
You know, when Mark and I were at the Justin Bieber concert a few months ago, we had a chance to interview him.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually, I got to tell you, the interview he did for Complex Magazine, I know that people at home are like, "Are you serious right now?" I am dead serious, and this is a shout out to my friends Dr. Rob and Dr. Dick. I want you to go on the website and pull up that Complex Magazine article on Justin Bieber. This guy actually gets it. His take on Christianity, when he says he wants to live like Jesus, he actually understands, or at least he can speak what it is that Jesus is about. And you know, he's quoted consistently in the article saying, you know, this is really not about being churchy. This is really not about doing something because you have to, but it's really about, "I love you, Jesus, because you first loved me." And it's like, wow.
And I don't. More of our congregation would say that, right?
Yeah. So this is a kid who understands, number one, his imperfect state, his sinfulness, and is saying, and what he's communicating to his young believers is look, we have a healer in Jesus, and you don't need to go in all these other directions looking for healing. Well, you've got somebody who died for you on a cross so that you could be made well. And I'm thinking, this kid is actually kind of on target, really. So, you know, kudos to the preachers that are working with him and to the Holy Spirit moving in him, because it is clear to me that this kid gets it.
I was reading in some of the other news articles about him from this week because he's getting ready to, as they say, drop a new record. And although I guess they don't say record anymore, and it's NBC, the Today Show is going to have 3 days of him, 2 days of interviews, and then another day that's a concert ahead of this new record. But and also in some of the writing was interesting, and that talks about him at 21 years old now being wanting to be the more enduring artist. To more mature, setting aside all these things. We've got to remember, again, at 21, he's already gained fame since he was like 15, I think was when he first had a first hit record. So are we not giving him slack for being, for growing up? Are we giving him a hard time for that?
The Justin Bieber image that we all kind of have in the back of our minds might not actually be Justin Bieber. It might just be the way Justin Bieber has been marketed to everyone. I mean, there are.
Well, I think the arrests are on his own.
Possibly. Yeah. The monkey scandal, of course, but no, but some of that might be the way he's marketed, and we may be seeing something else here from Justin Bieber. But we get this a lot in pop culture, and we find it very interesting with someone who we have pigeonholed as one way, sort of encounters Christianity. And I think Doc was talking about this, maybe the light is shined in their life to a certain way and it reveals something and they're like, hey, what's going on? But on a side note, I thought Bob Dylan was a Christian when he put out Free Will and Bob Dylan, which is his first album.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize there was a conversion there afterwards. So.
Well, he called a Jewish cowboy is what he called himself before that.
That's right.
That's right. But the idea of that some pop stars or people in the Hollywood medium, the 24-hour pop cycle of news, of e-news and everything else that comes out, I think it surprises people sometimes, and may surprise many how many people of faith actually there are, because they don't wear it on their sleeve. Mm-hmm. So is that an issue here or not? I mean, are we going to be looking for him now? We're going to judge him more differently?
Doubt. Some of the best Christian movies that I have seen are not marketed as Christian movies. They're just not. I mean, and some of the best Christian music I would suggest out there is not marketed as Christian music.
Right.
I periodically, not periodically, quite a bit, I tend to listen to rap sometimes. Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of theology being done in rap music, which we just automatically would think, at least I would stereotypically think, rap is diametrically opposed to the narrative of the Christian gospel. But, I don't think that that's necessarily the case all the time. And I would say some of this with movies as well. I mean, there are movies that are put out, Kirk Cameron and all this kind of stuff, that I would suggest are actually not very Christian movies. And other movies that aren't put out as Christian movies actually pick up Christian themes and do a better job and a more honest job with those themes than stuff that is touted as Christian. So I think that this distinction that we have between secular and sacred, particularly in music, when I was growing up, that was a big thing, secular music versus sacred music. I think we're finally coming to the point where we're saying, look, there is really no secular, there is no place in which God is not, which is where I would probably define secular. So therefore we can look at different things and see sacredness even right next to what something might be called secular.
Okay. I know, Doc, probably you may remember growing up, as I do, there used to be a radio show called Powerline. I think it still exists.
We've talked about this, yeah.
And it made a point of what were the Christian themes that were in current pop music. That it might use. I remember using things like Dr. My Eyes from Jackson Browne or talking about some other pop song. Well, then it converted once Christian music actually kind of went over the threshold of being more popular. You started using that, and the show went way downhill because it was having a more difficult time drawing the themes out in something that wasn't just, okay, it's defined now in this box, and it has to stay in this box instead of drawing it out of a pop culture theme.
I have to laugh because I do remember that. What I really remember was my family, we were huge Lawrence Welk fans. I still am. I mean, I confess.
You have champagne bubble machine in your house.
I totally confess here that I love the Lawrence Welk Show. And one of the great moments on the Lawrence Welk Show in all of history was when Christian music was starting to come out, but the lines were kind of blurred, and Lawrence Welk had a couple of his singers get up, and he said, now they're going to sing a new Christian song. It's a wonderful song. I hope you all will like it. And they got up and they sang One Toke Over the Line, Sweet Jesus. You can Google that on YouTube and you'll find it. It's absolutely one of the great gaffes of all time. But my point, there is a point actually to this, and that is I like the fact that Justin sees Jesus as his healer. I like the fact that Justin understands that Jesus died for his sins. What the opportunity that Justin has that he's not taken advantage of yet is full confession.
Right.
He has not talked about forgiveness. He's not laid his life out there and confessed. Now,
He may not be there yet.
his confession can be there with
Yeah.
Jesus, and that's fine. But Jesus, for us in faith, is more than just our healer. He is our Lord and Master. And what I see in Justin in his actions is a guy who's on a journey, and what I pray is that journey leads him to a place where Jesus becomes his Lord and Master, and when confession, which really will have an enormous influence on his fan base, becomes a more regular part of his public speaking.
You know, we profess that we say we want people to know us by our love, you know, by our how we act in the world and how we behave, etc. But when it's a pop star who does that, then all of a sudden, if they're not the Pope, then they're walking down the wrong path. As soon as they make a profession of faith and then they make a mistake, they're like forever tarnished. And I think we have to look at that anyway. But that's something that's an interesting thing, and I actually may be following some more of Justin Bieber. I never thought I'd say that.
Can't wait.
More to come in a moment on Faith Matters. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And thanks for joining us. I'm Ben Ball, along with Bishop Doc Loomis and also Reverend Mark Woods. And I couldn't resist, actually, presenting this one to you because I think it's, in many cases, has been such a silly discussion going on, but we need that from time to time. But especially like it's from Todd Starnes at Fox News, and he's also on the talk station, does opinion pieces with us as well, too, from Fox News. And the headline, it's a Starbucks coffee cup, America. It's not the Holy Grail. There's trouble brewing at Starbucks, and if you believe what you read on social media, the 2015 Red Holiday Cups are the greatest threat to Christianity since the Islamic State started beheading the faithful. A very vocal group of Christian coffee lovers is a bit perturbed at the lack of Yuletide flavor in their 2015 Red Holiday Cups. Now, you probably all know the story by now. In fact, it's probably the greatest marketing that's ever been done for Starbucks.
I agree.
Is they every year they put out their quote holiday cup, although I don't know that they ever phrase it that way. But they put out their cup, and it's a red cup or some tint of red, with usually adorned with various things on it, you know, designs, etc., that supposedly evoke holiday feel. And this year, though, it's just the cup with the green Starbucks and green and white Starbucks logo on it, and nothing else on it. And now there have been some people that call this part of the war on Christmas. You can maybe tell by my tone, I don't find that to be the case. I just think it's pretty silly, all in all. But there's some irony to it as well, because in the past, the symbols have been things like a tree, which is, you know, actually more pagan in origin. It has, you look shocked.
What?
Has, you know, other snowflakes, which aren't Christian necessarily, but the Starbucks commercial that's out now too, by the way, look very closely at the TV commercial. It's the old cup. It's not the current one. It has one that has designs on it, but they're very nuanced, so you don't see it very briefly. But look closely.
Our local Starbucks manager is calling corporate right now.
Yes, that's right. That's right. But I think it's been wonderful marketing for them. But I think Todd Starnes actually nails it here, besides the Holy Grail line, which is great. But he says, should we really expect a secular company to embrace Christianity? Isn't that the point? I mean, isn't that the whole problem that some Christians are having with their favorite store, not saying Merry Christmas or not doing all that? Is that they want, Mark, just as you have said, we look to the court to do our theology.
Yeah.
Are we looking to corporate America to embrace our faith?
Yeah, probably. Let me go on record today as saying, I hope we Christians lose the war on Christmas. I want to lose that war. No, I think, and I think that's right. I think that the moment we think that a Starbucks cup symbol is is where Christmas is going to, lie or something, that becomes a problem for me. And I think the more we take those symbols off of things like Starbucks and the more we're actually paying attention to what we're actually doing, I think. So, I mean, I would even suggest...
It's like the irritant that makes a pearl, is what you're saying.
Right. And I would even suggest that I think it was last year when we talked about nativities being taken from public places. I even would probably agree with that. As a pastor, as a confessing Christian, I think the more we do that, and this is... Usually the opposite is said by Christians. Oh, we need that stuff in the public square. I'm saying the more we take that out of the public square or away from corporate coffee cups or T-shirts or whatever, and we move away from that T-shirt kind of Christianity, the more I actually think we're taking our faith seriously.
Now, I do have a problem when a corporation says you can't not say things like Merry Christmas or Have a Blessed Day. I've got an issue with that.
And I don't want any, and I'll hear, and we can argue about it, but I don't want anybody to say Merry Christmas to me. It's not Christmas, right? I mean, it's Advent. It will be Advent. And so let's not say Merry Christmas until the 25th. Is that correct?
You need to be an Anglican. We don't sing Christmas songs.
We don't either. At least in my church, we don't.
Yeah, I don't even. What is with that?
I know. So Merry Christmas. Taking Merry Christmas away right now is perfect. I think that this is a win
Paul
for
Stallsworth
Christians.
is going to love hearing this.
This is a win for Christians if we can take Merry Christmas away from Walmart employees saying it to us.
Listen, I want to go on record as saying I'm actually a Toby Keith Red Solo Cup kind of Christian. I'd much rather put my stake in his red cup than anything Starbucks. I like the author of this article. I'm now 3,621 days without Starbucks coffee, and I'm doing just fine. Thank you.
Congratulations.
I wanted to confess that it's just not my favorite coffee, and then they're not an advertiser here, are they?
No.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
We're trying to get them, but no, not now. It's not happening.
One of our advertisers does actually bring us a cup of Starbucks coffee every Monday morning, and I've told her that we don't really have to have that, but that's fine. So I take it when it's given to me.
I hear you.
Very nice. Well, I am in complete agreement with with my lesser Anglican Methodist brother Mark that in fact,
like little sisters, you're a lesser Anglican.
I'll take it.
I personally am going to head out to the parking lot and start pulling "Keep the Christ and Christmas" bumper stickers off all the cars out here at the station today. I think it is a war that would be good to lose. I think Christmas has. Golly, I just don't. Christmas didn't really used to exist, and the church grew and did real well without it. And I'd love to see it torn back to that personally.
I think that's right.
And I'm not even a Seventh-day Adventist, but I would like to see it go away.
I have the hardest time with sometimes with holidays because of really where we have. You talked about the lack of separation between secular and sacred. Well, we have taken the sacred, in a far different direction, often with our expressions of what Christmas is. I think instead of what it really is. So
you have to come to my office sometime, Ben. And behind my desk is about a 4 foot tall icon that was written by a friend of mine. It's about 4 feet by 2.5 feet, and it's Saint Nicholas. In his St. Nicholas garb, he looks like one of the early church fathers with his beard and everything. And when people come into my office and they ask me who that is, I say it's Santa Claus.
Yes. Yeah,
that's right.
Well, I've told this story, and it's maybe largely myth about St. Nicholas at Nicaea. I've told that to our church as about here's the real Santa Claus. Here's what he really took this faith seriously. But we've moved it into a Coca-Cola icon. So.
Yeah, I think a retreat. I think a retreat from this kind of Christmas is a good thing, and that's why I say, on a serious note, that's why I say we need to lose the war on Christmas. I think a retreat of Christians from the kind of marketing that we have kind of grabbed onto, because it's not. See, we usually think, oh, well, you can either market Jesus or not Jesus. The problem is not what you're marketing. The problem is the marketing itself. is the system of economic marketing that we place ourselves in, and that really you can't. It's very hard to escape from. But I think a retreat from all of that is probably a good thing for American Christianity on some level.
We're going to give Robert a rebuttal period on the
No,
next week.
that's why I said that, because Robert's not here. He can't.
Here's the amazing
I didn't say capitalism. I was going to, but I didn't, because I know
But
it
if we
would
were
drive
sitting
Robert
in a
nuts.
boardroom right now at Starbucks International, wherever that is, in Seattle or Portland or somewhere, if we were out at a Starbucks, I can guarantee you they are not sitting around a table talking about the pros and cons of a Christian Christmas on their cup.
No.
I mean, in fact, they betray themselves. In the very article we read, it says, look, we're all about inclusion and diversity. The two things that I'm a marketing, that's where I come from, is marketing. There's the two things that they talked about at the table before they did this. One, we are going to get some major press here. This is going to be great. I'll bet they'll be
right.
talking about this on radio stations as far away as
More than
North
city.
Carolina. And then the second thing I think they thought about was our brand is inclusion and diversity. That's the language that Starbucks has always used. And anything that says Merry Christmas is going to hurt their brand.
Right.
And that's all they're talking about. No one's sitting around going, how can we kill Christianity?
Yeah.
Right. And interesting idea of inclusion, though, since it costs you, what, $7 a cup. So I'm not sure.
I was going to say the same thing, Ben. I think that's probably right, too.
So there's some interesting ideas, again, in marketing of what that means. In marketing, you make things mean what you want it to mean, right? Yes. I mean, we've watched politics learn that lesson in marketing.
So thank you, Starbucks, and you can send those checks to 132 Tidewater in Newport. We're so glad that we could be a part of promoting your Christmas your non-Christmas campaign.
Yeah, there you go. Meanwhile, people were saying because Dunkin' Donuts has responded. There's an article out today that Dunkin' Donuts has responded with joy. They have joy on their cup and things that look kind of like a wreath. Well, I said this morning on the air, I was saying, I imagine that was ordered months ago. They didn't just come up last week and said, "Oh, let's get these cups out now." They've done that, and
again, Dunkin'
I prefer
Donuts,
their
that
coffee
address is
anyway.
132 Tidewater.
All right.
And I like the cream-filled ones.
Thank you for joining us. I prefer Americano coffee, actually, but thank you for joining us here on Faith Matters.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.